You watch as the sun that controls your solar system gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it collapses in on itself, taking you and every other planet in the system with it. Then you wake up. The Outer Wilds is an adventure puzzle game that requires you to do an ungodly amount of reading for a video game. Oh my god, 8 pages? Now, while beautiful, this game is my worst nightmare. Everything is so huge all the time, and watching the sun rise over the horizon makes me shit myself every time. The creative director, Alex Beacham, wanted to make a game where you're just fueled by your own curiosity, meaning that there are no objectives in the game, there's no quests or anything like that, just you and what you feel like you should do. The whole premise of the game is that you're the newest Hearthian, one of these 4-eyed, weird blue-looking things, to join your society's space program, letting you fly out into space. And right before you coincidentally link with ancient technology that keeps you stuck in a loop, reliving the last 22 minutes of your solar system. The game's tutorial is entirely optional, which I love. The guy who built your ship tells you you have to get the launch codes from the observatory, which is the big building looming over the village. On your way there, you pass by a test rocket, which teaches you how to fly your ship, a zero-G cave where you drop in and repair a satellite, which gets you used to controlling yourself with no gravity, and a patch of green rocks that is identified as ghost matter, which can kill you very quickly if you touch it. And finally, you walk into the observatory where you pass by a statue depicting an ancient race called the Nomai with its eyes closed. The observatory doubles as a museum that has a few things to look at, but most importantly, sample text that teaches you how to translate Nomai text, and something called quantum shards. Quantum shards are basically obsidian rocks that teleport around the surrounding area whenever you aren't looking at them. The sign tells us that quantum objects exist in all possible positions until we observe it, where we force it to exist in one reality. To get the launch codes, all you have to do is go upstairs, talk to this guy, and he'll give them to you. On your way out though, the Nomai statue turns to you, opens its eyes, and plays your own memories back to you. And after that, you could really do whatever you want. You could fly to whatever object in the solar system you want to, talk to whoever you want to, or fly into the sun. But exactly 22 minutes after you started exploring, the sun explodes, and everything you did is played back to you as it sinks into some object, emulating how your memories fell into the statue whenever it first opened its eyes. You wake up back at the campfire that you woke up at this morning, and talking to the ship engineer, he remembers nothing about the sun exploding. Now, you're stuck exploring the same 6 planets for the next 22 minutes. Starting with Dark Bramble, it's the farthest planet in the galaxy, and it's very icy. And just so you know how massive the solar system is, here's the ship in scale to the planet. Looking inside the planet, you can see lights that will either lead you to more cores or into the mouth of an anglerfish, which was alluded to earlier in the museum where they have one on display. Obviously, this planet doesn't follow space laws, as each inside of a core is impossibly massive. If you pull out your signal identifier, which is kind of like a radio that picks up sounds within your solar system, you can hear a harmonica somewhere within the planet. Next is the biggest planet in the solar system, called Giants Deep. It's covered in a thick, cloudy atmosphere, and as you penetrate it, you're greeted with a water planet filled with tornadoes and very few land masses. You can see orange jellyfish floating in and out of what looks like the core of the planet. Here you can find the single best NPC in the game, named Gabbro, who came here just because. There's a broken cannon that we see shoot something at the start of every cycle orbiting the planet. After that is Britta Hollow, which is a planet that is actively falling apart because its own moon, Hollow Lantern, shoots meteors to the planet's surface, causing it to break apart and fall into the black hole at the center of the planet. Here you can find Ryback, who plays a guitar while stuck on a ledge right above the black hole at the center of the planet because he's too scared to move. Unfortunately, the only thing he's really useful for is the fact that he has an elevator attached to his little piece of land, and if you are about to fall into the black hole, you can try to maneuver yourself into it to save yourself from falling in. Then you have Timber Hearth, which you don't really spend a lot of time on. There's tons of other inhabitants, all of them have really trivial things to say, but if you go to a different part of the planet, you can find a scientist analyzing a dark bramble seed. If you walk up to it with your signal scope, you can hear the harmonica like we heard whenever we were at Dark Bramble earlier. And if you shoot your scout into the opening, you can see it's connected to the actual Dark Bramble. Orbiting Timberhearth is its moon Outer Rock, where Esker stays. On the backside of it is a massive crater where a piece of Dark Bramble actually hit it. There's really nothing of note to visit on the moon, but you just need to know that Esker is here for the sake of the video. The final planets in the system are the Hourglass Twins. The Ash Twin is a planet that is covered in sand by the start of every cycle, and the Ember Twin is void of sand. Over time, as you get closer to the explosion of the sun, the sand is transferred from one planet to the other. As sand gets filtered onto the Ember Twin, the less you can do, and the less you can access. But as the sand moves from the Ash Twin, the structures on that planet are revealed, letting us actually do things on it. Church sits on the Ember Twin being a waste of space. He's your average Redditor, 5'2", no hygiene, and he talks about the planets around him like he's an intellectual or something. There is another astral body in the system called the Quantum Moon, which looks like a moon made of gray clouds. It disappears and moves to a different planet every time you're not looking at it, kind of like a quantum rock. If you try to land on it, technically it counts you as not looking at it, so it teleports to a different planet. Shooting the scout onto the planet, all we see is static. There are also a few other random things in the solar system, kind of like the Interloper, which is this comet, which we'll get to at the end of the video, and a red blinking light. Whoa, is that the subscribe button? Look at this graph right here. 99.99% of people that watch my channel aren't subscribed. That's insane. Go ahead, bro. YouTube sometimes unsubscribes you unknowingly. You know, they just unsubscribe you and you just don't know it. So make sure you're subscribed. And we can go ahead and continue with the video. The collection of planets in this game is very unique. What makes this game even more rare is the fact that it's an actually open world space game, which doesn't really happen that often. Plus, this game has no enemies, meaning that it has to rely heavily on the storytelling and the environment, which I feel like it does an amazing job of. Also, please don't mention the fact that every time I use Facecam, I look different and the time is different. It's fine, just don't bring it up, it's fine. Now, obviously, this is a non-linear puzzle game, meaning that the game is going to be played differently from person to person depending on what planet you start on. From there, the game is going to breadcrumb you to different planets so you can uncover more information. I feel as though the game guides you to Giant's Deep first because when you wake up, that's the very first thing you see. Entering the planet, one of the first things you might see is an island with a plume of smoke coming off of it, which the game does very often. They use plumes of smoke to guide the character where important information might be without holding their hand, which I feel like is very important in an open world game like this because it's very easy to get lost. Arriving at the island and talking to Gabbro, he actually reveals that he's stuck in a time loop just like you, giving you and him a very special connection. When you ask about it, he points you to an island he deemed Statue Island, where the statue he's connected to resides. You can find the island very easily because you can see the statue that he's connected to very obviously buried in the sand out in the open. Right next to the statue is a broken door, with a sign right in front of it saying that we're at the statue workshop. Looking for an additional point of entry, we end up at the top of the island, where we gain a viewpoint into the facility. Looking into the opening, we can actually see that the bottom is open to the water, meaning that we should be able to jump into the water and swim into the workshop. In doing so, not only do I shit my pants. Alright, it's okay. Alright, it's fine. Okay, it's fine. Oh, fuck, I hate this. Okay. No, okay, it's fine. But we find out that there's a strong current stopping you from swimming low enough to enter the facility. This is the first roadblock that we meet. And exploring around the rest of the island, there is no other way to get into the workshop without finding a way past the current. At least that's what it looks like. If you look at the base of the island, you can actually see that it's not connected to anything. Now the most interesting aspect of this planet comes into play. See, I didn't mention earlier that these tornadoes are actually strong enough to throw things into the air, meaning that if you wait long enough, a tornado will come by, hit the island, picking it up into the air, and throwing it into space. Now, while you're in space, all you have to do is maneuver under the island, into the factory, and into a tornado pod, which protects you from the fall damage that you would get from the island crashing back down into the planet. Get there. It's fine. It's there. Get there. Whew. I really like this puzzle because even though it's not really that hard, it's not readily apparent. You really only learn this by playing the game and spending time on the planet. Nobody ever tells you this information. Entering the area, we find Nomai text describing something called the Ash Twin Project, where memories are paired with an individual and stored inside of a mask. We can see an illustration of the process happening here. Now, while this is important to let us know what's happening to us, it's even more important to know that technically this game happens all in the head. Wow, Pyrocynical would be so proud. Putting a stone tablet into a stand, you can see an odd group of masks surrounding you, which honestly had me shitting myself at first, but we can assume this is the Ash Twin project because of the masks. One is highlighted because of the player, one is highlighted because of Gabbro, and one more for an unknown party. Moving to a different island, we learn about the orbital probe cannon. The object floating in orbit broken into pieces. The probe cannon was a device built to find something that the Nomai discovered called the Eye of the Universe. Every action they did in the solar system was to locate the Eye of the Universe and discover what it was. The cannon was built to shoot a probe as far into the universe as it could, at which point they would hope it hit the Eye of the Universe and send that data back to them. That's the blue thing that we see shoot at the beginning of every loop. Reading a slate found deeper in the compound, we find out that somehow a piece of the cannon dropped below the current and into the core of the planet, which they thought was impossible, and is impossible to us. However, a conversation between the two Nomai let us know that the answers to how a piece of the cannon sunk into the core of the planet is in the observatory on the south pole of Brittle Hollow. We don't know why it's important yet, but we can assume by including information like that, it will be important to get there in the future of the game. A massive tornado cuts off the entire north pole of the planet, and there's no way to push past it. But if you fly out of the atmosphere and position yourself correctly, you can actually drop into the center of the tornado on the North Pole. In doing so, you're faced with a giant tower right on the center of an island. This is the Tower of Quantum Trials. Now, I know it looks like a lot because it's an entire tower, but this really only teaches you two important things. One being the fact that quantum objects don't move when you have a picture of them. Technically, it counts you as looking at it because there's documentation of it. So if you stop physically looking at it, if you still have the picture, the object won't move. And secondly, it teaches you that there are other quantum shards on other planets that have other quantum lessons to teach you. And after that, there isn't much else that we can do on this planet, except for go onto the orbital probe cannon itself. Arriving at the probe, thankfully there's artificial gravity to hold the ship down right at the opening, so we don't have to spacewalk or leave our ship to enter the compound. The probe has 3 different rooms. The first room of the probe is the control module. It shows us 2 significant things. This room holds a liquid diagram. To use it, we have to control the ball with our eyesight and move it from notch to notch along the track. The first thing it shows us is the cannon getting the order to launch the probe. And the second thing it shows us is the probe breaking apart from the force of the shot. Notably, we can see a chamber of the cannon breaking off and falling somewhere, probably onto Giant's Deep due to the planet's immense force of gravity. The second room is the launch module. Obviously, the opening is busted, meaning that we can't get through. Shooting our scout into the room, we can see there's a large crack in the glass, meaning that if we want to get into the room, we are forced to spacewalk. Again, this game has no fightable enemies, but it does a great job of making you uncomfortable nonetheless by pushing you out of your comfort zone. Having to leave the safety of your ship to spacewalk to a crack in the window with Giant's Deep looming in the background is genuinely the stuff of nightmares. Getting into the room, it is completely destroyed. Thankfully though, there's a vision pool at the bottom of the room that's in pristine condition. There's a stone tablet in the room for the third module of the probe, labeled the tracking module. By inserting it into the stone stand, we can get a vision of where the module lies. We can see that the module is surrounded by coral and electricity. It looks exactly like the core of Giant's Deep. So now we have to go to Brittle Hollow so that we can go to the Southern Observatory so we can find out how to get to the core of Giant's Deep so that we can get the coordinates to the Eye of the Universe. Arriving at Brittle Hollow, our goal is to get to the Southern Observatory, so obviously we go to the South Pole. Arriving there, we're met with a massive glass dome with the ship sitting out in front of it. The pathway out front leads to the door that's obviously broken. Despite being thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years old, the only thing broken in this entire structure is the door. That makes so much sense. Thank you, video game.
Let me in, please.
At the door, there's a tape recording of Ryback saying that though this door is broken, there's a way to get to the observatory from under the crust of the planet. Now, we don't know how to get under the crust, meaning that at this point you might want to look for campfire smokes in the air. Or you can pull out your signal scope. After wandering around with it out for a little bit, you run into a new signal that you've never seen before. This is a distress beacon from an escape pod that the Nomai ships used. At this beacon, there's text explaining how they had to eject from their main vessel, though we don't know why. Now, despite this being an escape pod that is made to crash land onto a planet, We see no seats or restraints anywhere, so I have no idea how these people lived. But when you enter the ship, at the bottom there's an escape hatch that you can activate. Doing so, the door is ejected from the escape pod and sent flying into the black hole. These planks lead to the Hanging City, right under the crust. Due to notes we read earlier, we know this was a temporary settlement set up to avoid meteors from Hollow's lantern. Here we learn that the Nomai were following a signal they received that was older than the universe. And in following it, Dark Bramble shot out and wrapped itself around the vessel when they got too close. This is what caused the Nomai to fire escape vessels from the ship. One went to Ash Twins, one went here, and one got stuck inside of Dark Bramble. This means we can probably find the remnants of that third escape pod and the original vessel. To progress further under the crust, you have to follow these gravity crystals that you saw near the main entrance. The only thing is, depending on how long you stay in the city, the crust that connects the gravity crystals could be broken apart, meaning that your only choice to get out is to fall into the black hole that's right above you. Or you might just jump down to see what happens. You're spit out at the corresponding white hole. Your perception skewed and bent due to the immense gravity around you. Right in front of you is the white hole station. Maneuvering into the station, you are greeted with text that explains that warp towers are tuned to certain astral bodies that teleport you to that specific planet only, and when they're only pointed directly at them. There's a projection stone on the seat here that you can pick up, and even though it can't be used here, you can use it where you're teleported to whenever you get back onto Brittle Hollow. Going to the lower chamber, we can turn the station to point at Brittle Hollow. Arriving back on the planet, we learned that somehow we arrived 0.0001 seconds earlier than when we had left, which should be impossible. But thanks to that projection stone we picked up, we learned that the Nomai plan to recreate the phenomenon on the Hourglass Twins at a place called the High Energy Lab. They hope to use it in the Ash Twin projects to send things back in time. I really like the White Hole Station because this is a very natural way to teach us this rule. Whenever you're first on the planet, you're likely to fall into the black hole. And even if you're not, you're likely to jump in out of curiosity. So at some point, the player learns this lesson, guaranteed. Now that you're back on the surface of the planet, you can pull out your signal scope to find an unidentified quantum signal. Following it, you are led to a grove with a quantum shard residing in it. In the grove, we can see trees teleporting around kind of like a quantum rock. The text on top of the rock explains that since the rock is close to these trees, the trees themselves have become quantum as well. There's a large building in the middle called the Tower of Quantum Knowledge, with text saying that if you want to travel onto the quantum moon, you need the information in this tower, which to us has been thought to be impossible. I like that this game never outright says what you can do, but by following the footsteps of the past civilization and reading their conversations, all the information we get about what's possible feels natural. Following down the step to enter the tower, we reach the bottom. Sadly though, the gravity path that leads us to the tower is broken, and there's no way to fly into it with your suit or your ship. So again, another path is shut off from us. But just like on Giant's Deep, if we use our knowledge of how the planet behaves, we can find a way into the tower. If we wait at the base of the tower, about halfway through the cycle, the ground holding the quantum tower gets hit by a meteor, causing it to break away from the planet, and after falling into the black hole, we can traverse our way into the tower to learn what to do on the quantum moon. We learned that the Nomai make journeys to the quantum moon as a coming of age kind of thing. They built a shrine on the moon that was meant to help them reach a mysterious sixth moon location, but only when it's on the north part of the quantum moon. I have a dial that tracks the location of the moon. It goes to every planet in the solar system and the eye of the universe, which is the sixth location. It also tells you that no matter what, if you leave the atmosphere of the quantum moon and re-enter it, you always end up deposited on the south pole of the moon. Now, even though you might feel prepared to go onto the moon, pulling out the scope, you can hear one more shard on the Ember Twin, so you know you have at least one more lesson to learn. Now, on a third loop back to Brittle Hollow, you might notice that the surface of the planet is very barren, but that's intentional rather than a design flaw. In an interview when asked why the game is so barren, Alex explained that since it's an open world game, he didn't want players to get lost since there's very little hand-holding. So we only added things like trees or structures in areas that the player should be interested in so that they don't spend a large amount of time walking through random woods hoping to find something to help them progress the game. Wow, he's so smart. Congratulations. You have fixed game development. You can come across a gravity cannon where we learn a shuttle is currently located on the quantum moon. We can call it back, but doing so doesn't yield many results. There are two different directions we can take here. We can go to the Hanging City or to the Northern Observatory. For the sake of sequence, we go to the Hanging City because there's one piece of vital information there. We cross a bridge that makes the crossroads, which looks insanely cool, and make it to the Taking City. Immediately, we are met with 3 walls that can hold scrolls. It discusses how they plan to power the Ash Twin projects. It talks about how they plan to make something called an advanced warp core, which they use to power the vessel, which was their original ship. Looking down into the black hole, you can see the forge that crafted the warp core, though we have no actual idea what the core is. And after that, you can backtrack and go to the Southern Observatory. Starting at the cannon again, there's a short jumping puzzle, and after it, we find a shaft that pulls us into the observatory. We're instantly greeted by 2 simulated tornadoes and no my text behind it. It explains how a piece of the cannon fell into the core. There are left-turning tornadoes that lift everything that enters its path into the sky, like we saw with the islands, and a right-turning tornado, which is very rare, and if you enter it, it will shoot you down with enough force to drop you down through the current. There's also a liquid diagram here that shows how big your solar system is. First, it shows the rotation of the hourglass twins. Then Timber Hearth, then Brittle Hollow, then Giant's Deep, then Dark Bramble. Lastly, it shows the projected orbit of the Eye of the Universe. We can see how massively far away it is based on how small our main solar system got. Going back to Giant's Deep and trying out what we learned on Brittle Hollow, it works just as the Nomai said it would. Now we should be able to access the coordinates to the Eye of the Universe simply by entering the core. Which we can't do because there's an electrical current keeping us from entering. We see jellyfish entering and exiting the core, but we don't know how they do it. But on the planet, we can see an island with a frozen jellyfish on it, which might have an answer. Getting there, we have a little puzzle with ghost matter, which is very easy. We're met with the tape of Feldspar saying that he's tired of being here and that he's going to go to Dark Bramble next. So we can assume that Harmonica coming off Dark Bramble is him. Naturally, you go to Dark Bramble after this, which isn't really a planet, but there are large holes within what looks like the core. So you can fly into them and you can see a collection of lights within those cores. There are 3 white lights and 1 red light. Flying to the red light, you run into an anglerfish. And if you manage to outrun it or outmaneuver it, which is incredibly difficult, you can enter the red light core. Doing so, you are led right to 3 other anglerfish that you cannot outmaneuver, making it impossible to progress here until you find a way to deal with the anglerfish. Though we can explore more of the planet using our signal scope. Using it, we can follow one of 2 signals, the harmonica or a distress signal, which is to be expected based on the art at Brittle Hollow. Following the harmonica, we are led to another seed core. Looking into the core, you can see 9 lights in it. Not knowing which lights are more cores and which one lead to anglerfish is terrifying, because once spotted, it's near impossible to lose an anglerfish. The funny part though is this is the only room without any anglerfish, so all the lights are red herrings. Using the signal scope, we are guided to the seed which the harmonica is coming out of. Entering slowly, we're greeted by a giant anglerfish. Upon further inspection though, it's just a skeleton. And we can see trees planted in its mouth with someone inside of it. This is Feldspar. He had been stranded here for multiple weeks. He talks about how he ended up coming here because he was bored. He talks about how he dodged vines and stuff that fill up the planet while being chased by anglerfish. Eventually, he was clipped by a fish and crashed, at which point he cleared out his ship and set up camp here. He has a ton of dialogue options, but we only care about 2. If we tell him about the seed that landed on Timber Hearth, he expresses concern about getting rid of it immediately, and brings up the fact that Dark Bramble wasn't always like this, but a seed somehow landed here and fragmented this planet into what it is today. We can actually see some early art of the game of what Dark Bramble looked like before it got fragmented. Based on the picture and the ice around the planet, we know it was another water-based planet. We can also ask him how to get into the core of Giant's Deep. He won't outright tell us, but hints to the fact that if we follow the flickering light to the branch he crashed in, we can find the answer. Doing so, we're led down a giant route that deposits us onto the surface of the planet. We can see another jellyfish stuck in the ice. The presence of a jellyfish here insinuates that the jellyfish originated on this planet, and when the planet exploded, a few landed on Giant's Deep. There's a tape that describes Feldspar trying to eat it, but he can't, saying that it tastes so bad, and he guesses the outside is only good for insulating itself to keep its inside safe from the electrical current of Giant's Deep. We can also walk into the jellyfish where we find a note from Feldspar saying not to eat it. But seeing that we can walk into it and knowing that the outside protects the inside, even though the story doesn't spell it out, we know that we should be able to enter the live jellyfish and hitch a ride into the core. But before we do that, we should investigate the distress signal. Getting to it is relatively simple. All you do is follow your signal scope so that we can locate it and dodge the anglerfish. Entering another core, this is one with spinning branches, which I think looks insanely cool. Using the signal scope, we're taken to another empty escape pod, meaning that the Nomai could have made it to somewhere safe. There's text inside explaining that they tried to return back to the vessel by following its signal, though they heard two signals. Kind of like how whenever we shoot our scout into a seed, there's duplicate signals of it. One was close and one was incredibly far away. Since they were low on supplies, their only option was to go to the closer one and hope that it was the right one. They said they would leave a trail of lights on the way in case any of their people came to follow them. Following the lights into the abyss, we were led to a seed surrounded by multiple figures, which turned out to be Nomai dead bodies. The signal they were following was a signal let off by the ship played through the seed, making it seem closer than it was. We can see Nomai bodies hugging each other as they realize they aren't going to survive. These two were probably boys. Shooting a scout into the seed, we can see what they were following. We can see their ship wrapped in bramble and absolutely massive. The signal shows that it's located somewhere within the red core, meaning that to get there, we have to find a way past the anglerfish. Before going to the last planet in the solar system, we return to Giant's Deep, because now that we know we can, enter the jellyfish, we can actually enter the core to see what the location of the Eye of the Universe is. We find another tornado, swim into the jellyfish that puts us into the coral core of the planet, which, might I add, is terrifying to swim around in. We can enter the last pod, which has 2 floors. The second has nothing of note to us, but the first contains a vision pool. The first notch shows us Giant's Deep. The second shows us a signal locator flying out. Then more. And then more. And then more until they cover up the screen, until only one remains, pointing directly to the eye. The locator was shot 9 million times before the eye was found, meaning that the loop has happened 9 million different times before we entered it, meaning that the universe has been stuck in the same 22 minutes for 1.3 billion days. The last node shows us a bunch of shapes. We're told that it's the coordinates to the Eye of the Universe, though it's not much use to us because there's nowhere we can put them in. I thought it'd show us like a location within the system to go to so that we can fly to it, but since there's nothing else we can do, we move on to the Hourglass Twins. Like I said in the beginning, one of them is covered in sand, meaning at the start of every loop, it's impossible for us to explore any part of it. But the Ember Twin is empty, and we have a lot to go through. First, we can find Chert. He's a bum, he sits here and does nothing, no real useful dialogue, but he does give us an interesting tidbit telling us that stars are exploding at an unprecedented rate and solar systems are vanishing one after another. Right next to him are caves that hold a rock, and a wall behind it, noting that they had seen this rock before, in the Lake Bed Cave, and how 2 Nomai were exploring it, and one of them disappeared out of thin air. We can follow the lead they left behind by following the stairs that lead into the ravine. It takes us into a cave opening, and after a short maze and jumping puzzle, we are dropped into a cavern where the Nomai vanished. There's nothing here besides a light switch, some text, and the Wandering Rock. The text describes how one Nomai was standing on the Wandering Rock, the other was examining the walls or something, the lamp went out incidentally, and when the Nomai relit it, their friend was gone. I'm gonna be entirely transparent, I was stuck on this very easy puzzle for way too long. I actually ended up looking up how to get past this puzzle because it was too high level for my brain. After googling what to do, all you do is turn the light off, stand on the rock, turn your flashlight off so you're in total darkness, then when you turn it back on, you're in a new position. The final quantum rule is that when you're on a quantum object, you are also quantum, and if you cannot see your surroundings, you technically exist in all possibilities until observation happens again. There isn't much left to explore in these caves, so we can move on to something else the scope is picking up. Going to the escape pod, there isn't much to figure out, just more Nomai talking about their escape from the bramble. But we do figure out that they built a city underground to withstand the extreme heat of the planet. Going into the pod, we can see into the caves, the impact having broke the surface of the planet. There are writings on the wall to guide us. One explaining how there's nothing to explore down the path, one explaining that at the end of the path is just trees for oxygen, and one telling us to follow the path so that we can make it to the Sunless City safely. It's a long path having you follow a sort of maze, but more importantly, you have to race the falling sand. If you arrive early enough on the planet, it's incredibly easy. After you follow the path, you are brought to a door with stairs. Going up to the stairs, we see a hole in a wall with a light behind it, like an anglerfish light. Shooting the scout into the room, we see a large skeleton of an anglerfish. There is no explanation for how it got here, but we can't enter the window-sized hole. But if you shoot your scout into its mouth, you can tell there's an opening in the floor that might be an entrance. Backtracking to the door, we can open it to a giant room. To the right, we see a platform lit up with trees behind it. Jumping down, we see 4 switches we can activate, each with its corresponding name to it. The Anglerfish Overlook District, the Stepping Stone District, the High Energy Lab Trailhead, and the Ice Shrine District. Now, while this may look like a lot, a large portion of this is not relevant to the story. Something that is relevant, though, is the fact that if you go to the Anglerfish Overlook District, you can find text on the ground explaining how kids would play on the skeleton, and that you can get to the skeleton by finding a hole within the Stepping Stone Caves in the Stepping Stone District. Opening the door to the cave, you follow a short path, and you're opened to a large cavern. Now, normally, you'd have no idea where to go, but if you left your scout in the mouth of the fish, then when you enter the cavern, the scout will show you exactly where to go. You can jump up into the hole entering the room. There are only 2 things here: a beam that takes you back to the surface, and text on the ground explaining the rules to the game that the kids would play. It's just tag in this one room, but the caveat was that the seeker has to be blindfolded because anglerfish in real life are blind. Now again, the game doesn't spell this out, but because of this information, we know that we can get past the fish by being quiet. After learning about the anglerfish, there's only one last thing on the Ember Twin, and that is the High Energy Lab. The only way to get there is a path in the Sunless City. It's the bottommost door with power lines coming out of it. And again, it's another maze.
Clearly, this game loves mazes, and I'm so happy about that because I love mazes too.
It brings you to a walkway which takes you to the High Energy Lab. Here we can open a window to a room that lets us simulate a white and black hole. Behind the simulator is text describing the intention here was to increase the time difference between entering a black hole and exiting the white hole, like the 0.0001 second we saw on Brittle Hollow. And they plan on doing that by increasing the energy put into the black holes. If we divert the energy from the Sunless City to the black holes, we can see a large gap between the scout entering the black hole and exiting. On the top floor of the lab, there's another text board explaining how they plan on using this concept with the Ash Twin projects. They plan on building a sun station to try and trigger the sun exploding, where they plan on using the energy of the explosion to send the project back in time 22 minutes. They also explain the warp towers that reside on the Ash Twin. Each building is meant to resemble a planet. Most of these towers were used for quick traveling, but 2 have special interest to us, one being the tower to the sun station. This tower doesn't have much in the way of story, but offers an amazing spectacle. After warping to the station, you walk through the halls, until you reach the door of the walkway that connects you to the second part of the station. Opening the door, you're struck by the realization that the bridge is broken, and to reach the other chamber, you have to spacewalk. I know I've been saying this a lot, but this game has no enemies, yet it forces you in terribly uncomfortable situations like having to do a spacewalk towards the sun. It's such a great use of the fact that you are tiny in comparison to this huge solar system. It is so amazing. The station lets us know that the last time the station was accessed was when the Nomai were alive, which was 300,000 years ago. The board here just talks about how they failed to cause the sun to explode, which was a given considering the fact that no Nomai are in the loop, and the loop is only happening now because the sun reached the end of its natural life cycle. And after that, the only relevant tower is the one for the Hourglass Twins. If you time it right, when the Ember Twin is right over the Ash Twin, the warp would activate, teleporting you to the inside of the Ash Twin. Here we are greeted by the same spinning room and masks like we were shown at the beginning of the video. Now we know we have one for me, Gabbro, and the probe. Moving further on, we can see an ungodly amount of reading, but thankfully we know just about everything on this wall. But it paints a picture of how the project works. First, the sun will explode, and using that energy from the resulting supernova, the Ash Twin project sends us back in time 22 minutes, and the orbital probe cannon gets the order to fire. And then exactly 22 minutes after these orders received, the sun will explode again, making the cycle repeat itself. After that, we see 2 switches, one to turn off the artificial gravity, and the other to access the core of the Ash Twin projects. We get the warning that removing the core of the Ash Twin projects would deactivate it, and if you deactivate it and the sun explodes, the game is over. But after discovering everything on the Ash Twin, there are only 2 questions left. What is on the Quantum Moon, and what is with the vessel stuck within Dark Bramble? Now that you have finally figured out all of the quantum rules, I think it's about time to go to the quantum moon. First, when we are approaching the planet, we have to take a picture of it. And after that, it should be as simple as landing on any other planet. You land squarely on the South Pole just like the tower said you would. And at the pole is the body of a Nomai who took their journey. Now we know to get to the 6th location, we have to get the shrine to the North Pole of the moon. Now the puzzle here is that parts of the moon is blocked off depending on what planet it's orbiting, because whatever planet it's orbiting, it replicates that terrain. The tower teleports around the planet because it's quantum due to it being on the moon, and the inside of the tower tells you to use what you learned from the quantum rocks on the planets. You know, I like you. I'm gonna tell you a little secret, okay? I just need you to get a little close. Closer. Even closer, silly guy. Don't be shy. The secret is that this puzzle is super easy if you make the moon orbit Giants Deep. This is because Giants Deep doesn't really have any terrain to block you from getting to the North Pole, so you can walk as far north as you want before you hit the tornado that covers the North Pole. Then all you do is get into the shrine, turn off and on your flashlight until you end up on Timber Hearth, then you can make it to the North Pole very easily. Open the door, we're introduced to a bunch of quantum rock and a long walk. Over the horizon, we see a figure standing beside 2 stone walls under a massive spout. This is Solanum, a Nomai that is still alive 300,000 years after her people died off in this galaxy. Trying to interact with her, obviously we don't speak the same language, so she makes some stones for us to pick up and put down and stands for her to understand what we're asking her in a rudimentary kind of way. Now there is a ton of dialogue here, all of which is interesting. If you pick up the explain and use stone, she will explain that she is on her pilgrimage to the eye of the universe and that the eye cannot be accessed from the moon, but that what we see in the sky and around us is a reflection of the eye itself. If you pick up the U and quantum moonstone, Solanum explains that she thinks she might be dead, saying her journey has come to an end. Which is true. The dead body at the South Pole of the moon is her body, but because she technically exists in all possible realities, because she's on the quantum moon, she's still alive. Lastly, if you put the you and me tablet in the podium, she says that you guys are friends, making this the most progressive game ever made, giving you a friend who is a woman. Thank you, Outer Wilds. Game of the year.
And it easily earns the badass seal of approval.
After talking to Solanum, there isn't anything else you can do on the quantum moon. If you try to leave through the spout, rather than being dropped off at the eye of the universe, you're spit out back at your solar system, where the only unanswered question is, what is the vessel? Now that we know we can float past the anglerfish, getting to the vessel is easy. All you have to do is go back to the seed where all the dead Nomai are, shoot your scout into the seed so that you have a marker on where the vessel is, go into the red room that's called the nest by the community, which will make sense in a second, and fly as fast as you can into the core so that you can coast by the anglerfish without having to boost. This was very easy to me because I have real life experience doing this. I like stealing money off of my blind grandmother's dresser while she sleeps to fund my gambling addiction. You know you're safe to move around when you hit the eggs that are in the middle of the core. After that, all you do is follow the signal to the seed housing the vessel. The vessel is an enormous ship. The scale from the skeletons floating around it is staggering. There's a massive hole in the side of the ship giving us an opening to its main hallway. There's only one room we can access that is connected to that hallway. Littered with skeletons, there's a pedestal in the middle of a room, clearly meant to hold an advanced warp core based on the broken one floating just off the pedestal. We can activate some sort of mechanism that lets us write lines as well. Surprisingly, there isn't a lot of useful text in here. The only interesting thing is the realization that the universe is near the end of its life cycle. According to the Nomai, there aren't many stable places in the universe left to live. The next step is obvious enough though. We have to get the advanced warp core from the Ash Twin projects and bring it here. Doing so, you bring power back to the ship. And this time, when you lift the mechanism at the front of the ship, the coordinates of the eye of the universe show up at the bottom of your screen. Putting them in, we're transported to the eye. We can see our sun a far distance in the back. The eye looks like a planet bending the space around it. Moving the orb on the ground to behind the pedestal, we can activate a black hole that takes us to the surface of the planet. On the horizon of the planet, we can see a massive storm. And walking closer to it, it looks like a massive wall. As we get closer, it gets darker, and the storm gets harsher and harsher, and the lightning strikes cause the items to teleport around. We can see a spout in the sky. That is the actual eye of the universe. It's just like the one we saw on the quantum moon. Right under the spout is a crater that we can walk into and up. Free falling into the spout, you're spit out into what looks like a massive cave, falling slowly until you land inside the museum. Going up the ramp, there's a universe in the middle that we can observe. The camera pulls back to reveal us and galaxies exploding. And now we're in a giant forest with hundreds of galaxies surrounding us. Walking in the woods, the galaxies around us die out until we're left in complete darkness. Until there's a signal nearby that we don't know. Pulling out the scope, we can hear heavy breathing. Until we run into ourselves, who turns into a tree, and then a smaller tree, and then a campfire. And after lighting it, a rocking chair shows up. Then Esker. Talking to Esker, he asks if you can hear music, hinting at you to pull out your signal scope, at which point you can hear Ryback's guitar. His guitar is stuck in a building, but if you flash your flashlight on and off, the building deteriorates. Grabbing his guitar, he's put back at the campfire. Talking to him, he tells you to get the rest of the people for the song. We follow signs to Gabbro's instrument up in a tree. We follow Feldspar's harmonica, which is guarded by an anglerfish. And we find Church Drum orbiting a sun among other suns. And since you found Solanum, we can get her for the song as well. There's a ring of skeletons pointing to a large white light in the sky. Flashing your light, they stack on top of each other. And then again, to a Nomai shuttle. Activating it, we are sped into the light, until we are put in space with Solanum's mask. Returning to the fire, everyone is waiting for you. By speaking to each of them, they start their part of the song. Until a bubble of infinite possibilities expand above the campfire. That is an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of possibilities that technically don't exist until we jump into it. A new Big Bang happens, creating a brand new universe. And after that, the game is over. A cool after credit image shows 14.3 billion years later of bugs sitting around a campfire roasting marshmallows like we did. The Outer Wilds is an amazing story game that kept me gripped front to back despite having non-conventional gameplay. It weaves a gripping story about a dead ancient race and a universe dying out in front of you. Generally, the public agrees that the game is great. Mobius Digital, the developers for the game, made a 245% return on the game since its release in 2019, and every reputable gaming source gives it at least an 8 out of 10. The game has a lot of cool stuff in it that didn't necessarily fit into the main story, so I figured now is the perfect time to go over it. Like the Interloper. It's a comet that orbits really close to the sun. If you land on it and wait for it to get close to the sun, the ice on top of the comet melts and you can enter it. This place is a maze filled with ghost matter. Before you go down any path, you have to shoot your scout first to see if it's safe. After reaching the center, we can see an exploded bulb of green matter. This comet was the origin of ghost matter and the cause of the Nomai's mass extinction. The bulb had immense pressure building up on the inside of it of ghost matter, and when the Nomai and the comet found this out, they tried to leave to warn the others, but it exploded, killing all the Nomai in an instant before they could even react, and blanketing the solar system with ghost matter. There are also alternate endings like what has been deemed the isolation ending by the community. All you have to do is take out the advanced warp core from the Ash Twin project and then fly out of range of the sun's explosion. If you pull out your scope, you can hear each part of the song go out one by one. All you can do is watch as the solar systems around you follow suit, leaving you to roam an empty universe until you die. Kind of like how you'll die alone. Another one is the breaking space-time ending. If you make it to the high energy lab and divert the energy into the black and white hole, like I showed earlier, there's an obvious window of time where two scouts exist. If you pick up the black hole core before the scout you shot enters the black hole, two scouts will exist at once, breaking space-time as the second scout shouldn't exist. A similar ending can be achieved called the self-ending. If you go to the Ash Twin projects when the sun explodes, a black hole opens. This is to send the project in the past 22 minutes. But if you enter the black hole, you wake up back at the campfire like normal. But this time, if you look at your map, you see two "you are here" markers. Going back to the Ash Twin project, you can find yourself standing on the wall. Talking to yourself after the initial shock wears off, the you against the wall wonders what would happen if you didn't jump into the black hole that appears at the end of the loop to close the causal loop you created. He also happens to wonder what the inside of his own mouth feels like. If you do jump into the black hole, the next loop plays out like normal. But if you don't, you create a paradox, breaking space-time again. Alright, and that's just about everything the game has to offer, besides the DLC, which I did not include because I didn't want the video to be an extra 30 minutes long, but also it still gives you a reason to play the game, because trust me, the DLC is beautiful, and I think it's pretty big as well. So, yeah, I don't know, go get the game, go buy the game, it's pretty good. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it if you made it all the way to here. If you did, join my Discord, man. I'll glaze you, personally. Yeah, please subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Comment, let me know what you think. This is the first time I made a video like this, so I understand it's a little rough. It's not perfect, but I enjoyed making it, and it took me quite a while. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much. I love you. Bye. Mwah, 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 mwah.